What's up everybody, Chris Bazzy here, and today we're bringing you part 2 of how to build a brand. Now, if you missed out on part 1 video, don't worry, we have it linked down below. We also have it here on the YouTube show card where you can go back and watch it and get caught up. So without further ado, I'm gonna hand it back to Jacob to finish out how to build a brand.
All right, so number 4, here's tip number 4. After we've designed our color palette, we've got our logo now. The logo has been integrated with our colors. We're gonna pick our fonts. And I cannot stress how important point number 4 is picking the right fonts. Colors have personalities, logos have personalities. We've been talking about that. Fonts have personalities. And that's a little interesting, but they do. And if your brand is a whole personality, that means fonts are extremely important because they're going to contribute or detract from the personality you're creating. So what we've got here, just a brief explanation of the different fonts that you can have. So there's 4 different types of fonts. If you're talking basic fonts, we have the 2 main ones are a serif and a sans serif. And right here you can see the serifs, they have little feet that come out. And any font that has little like feet that go like whoop, then that's a serif. A sans serif is more modern. They're going to be a little bit more sleek and sometimes more stern or bold. And as you can see, they have no feet. They are feet free. So the letters just kind of come to a stop. Those are sans serif fonts, and you can see the difference between the serif and the sans serif in this image here that I have. The third font is a script font, and script fonts are just cursive fonts. They're a bit more decorative. They can have sometimes more flowing or fun vibes to them, and you can kind of mix them into your brand occasionally. We're gonna get to that in a second. And then lastly, you have the display fonts. Display fonts are characters that are just completely decorative. These are not fonts that you would want to write any large amount of text in because the fonts are built primarily for one word or something like that. You can see here's a good example of a font that is got a lot of decorative elements to it. So where should you use these? Well, sans serif and sans serif fonts are good body fonts. Script fonts are good accent fonts, sometimes headline fonts, and display fonts are good for logo creation in my experience. So let's talk about fonts for a little while. Fonts are one of my favorite topics to talk about because my handle, as you might know, is Shrink Your Fonts. So what is Shrink Your Fonts? That means let's talk about fonts for a little bit. I love fonts, and your brand is going to be made up of mostly fonts. People will see fonts probably more than they'll see your logo, and probably more than they'll see your colors, honestly. But the font has to match what you're trying to do with your personality. Now, I like to suggest not using your logo font as a main font for your brand. The reason being is it's gonna just detract from your logo. If they see that font everywhere, it just kind of makes your logo seem not as important, not as unique. So I like to not use my logo font for a body font or a headline font or anything like that. Just keep the logo as itself. Pick complementary fonts that will fit what your logo design is trying to do. You're gonna need a font for body copy and a font for headlines, and that's the basic rule of thumb. Now, the unique thing is that doesn't have to be different fonts. You can actually use the same font for headlines and body copy. Here I'll show an example of a website that I did. So this is BoostTube. This is a website that I had done for a startup company here. And here you can see we have the body font and we have the headline font for this brand. And it's the same font. The headline font and the body font are both Montserrat, and the headline is just in all caps. It's a bolder version. So it communicates the same brand, and we didn't have to pick different fonts. One font will work just fine for what you're trying to do. But as you can tell, here if we go back to the home page, the logo stands by itself. This logo here is its own font. It's not the same as the Montserrat that we're using. throughout the rest. So we let that body font stand as its own. If you're a new designer, I recommend picking only one font. Make that your brand font, put it on everything, business cards, letterheads, website, whatever you do, put that font on it and make it the same. It'll bring nice cohesion and unity to your brand. If you're a little more experienced, you can pick maybe two, maybe a headline font and a body font, or maybe just like a headline body font, maybe a script font. At the most, I would do 3 fonts. I wouldn't do more than that. You can sometimes get away with a heading, a body font, and like a secondary script font that you just use for like fun things. But that's gonna be bigger brands that have a lot more work that they're doing. I would stick to 1 or 2 for the most part. One of the biggest problems that I see with fonts is that people make them too big. This is a pet peeve of mine, which is why my handle is @shrinkyourfonts, because I just believe that fonts need to be smaller. Pro tip here, humans read at a level of 9-point font, sometimes even 6-point font depending on the readability. So we don't need to have 12, 14, 16-point font on anything. Let's keep that font down. In fact, with most fonts, the readability level is best set at 10 or 11 points. So I know that all your professors in school were like, type it in 12-point New Times New Roman, but I'm just saying readability is actually better at 11-point or 10-point, and most fonts you can go way down even farther. So it's just not worth the extra space that you're gonna take up on your design. It makes your design look cluttered. You're gonna take your fonts, you're gonna shrink them down, and you're gonna notice that your designs look a lot cleaner and they're still just as readable as they would be at a full font size. Here, I'll actually pull up my Instagram account. So here's my Instagram, and I actually want to pull an example from here real fast. These business cards, which you can kind of see, these business cards, they're very readable, but the font on there is only 6-point font. Again, this is for BoostTube. We used Montserrat throughout the whole entire business card because they only have one font for them. So I'm actually gonna pull up this example. These are some business cards that I did for BoostTube, the website we just saw. Again, we're only using Montserrat on this. This is all Montserrat font. We only use one, but this font here is actually only 6-point font, and it's very readable. So this just proves that you don't need to have large fonts, and now we get a lot of white space, which is actually black, which is kind of funny because, yeah, never mind. Anyway, we have a lot of white space on the design of the card, which gives it just a really clean and classy feel. All right, so next one, I'm gonna blow through this one. It's called Developing a Brand Voice. And really simply put, your brand voice is how you talk. And if you're a freelancer, your brand voice needs to be you. It needs to be your personality. And if you're a company, your brand voice should play into the way that you want customers to feel about you. Wendy's is very snarky, but other companies, not so much. So think about your brand voice, think about how you want to write, how you want your brand to talk to people, and come up with a paragraph or something that you can kind of model, like, this is my voice. This is the extension of my personality. Next up, after we developed a brand voice, we want to design an artistic style. Now, this is one of my favorite parts, and this is, again, where you need a graphic designer's help, because your art speaks. Your art feels, make people feel things, it has emotion to it. So let's develop an art style that we can use on all of our different content and make that brand really come together around the logo and around the body fonts and around the different elements that we have, and it'll all feel like a uniform design. How do we do that? We come up with an artistic style. So this means the use of different shapes or different patterns, things that are in the brand that communicate this. And I'll show you some examples. So we use consistent brand elements across all things. Here again, let's go back to the ARC 80s. We talked about this earlier, and I said I was going to get back to it, so here we are. For ARC 80s, we use stars. Now the stars are blue because they match the blue of the ARC part of the logo, but we use stars on all of the branding stuff, and we also are going to use these little 3 little like our Atari lines, you might call them, or something of the sort. And those kind of become staples of the brand. So we put them on the business cards, we'll put them on flyers or whatever. We use the stars and our Atari lines to kind of become a staple icon of the Arcades brand. Now, by doing that, you actually end up building a consistent brand across different platforms. Here is another example of a brewing company that we're doing some work, and here you can see we used this kind of Memphis feel. Memphis is the style of artwork that there is there, and we've got this Memphis feel going on. A lot of dots, lines, busy, a lot of color, and it conveys this fun attitude, and right. So this brand is kind of going for a fun market share in the beer world, and we're using the exact same design elements. It's not the same all the time, but the same elements, the same artistic style across different things. So when you do that, you actually build a brand style, a brand artwork. It's your own personality. It's like the way you dress, right? And that's going to help your brand stay consistent across all kinds of different platforms. So now that we got everything in one place, we've got our logo, we've got our color scheme, our fonts, our brand voice, and our artistic style all kind of packaged in there, creating this big personality. We need to get the rules down. We need to build out a rule book and guidelines that we can follow so that we make sure we don't deviate from what we're doing. And that's called a brand guide. So next tip, establish a brand guide. Do this for yourself, do it for the company you're working for. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be if you want it to, but get everything in one place so you know what you're doing. This means get your logos in there. What does it look like on a white background, black background, colored background? Get your fonts in there. This is our headline font, body font, script font. This is how we're going to use these fonts. This is our brand voice. This is what we want it to sound like. Here's our color palette of colors that we use. Like I said, this doesn't have to be extensive. It can be anything. It can really just be anything that you put together in one place that you can refer to if you need to develop or design something, or if you're having someone else design something or write something, you can send it to them and say, hey, this is what we want. We want to stay consistent with this. All right, so here's an example of a brand guide, like I said, really quick, that I just created for Arcades, which we've been going back to a lot here. But here you can see we've got the logo on the light background, dark background. We've got colors in here. We've got a couple different shades of the same color, and the gradients, which we talked about. If you're going to have gradients, put those in there, say these are the gradients we're going to use. And then again, we've got the alternate logos, black or all white if it was to go on a colored background, and the details on the font. Only one font in this one. Again, simple. We have one font, Montserrat. One of our details is we put the tracking at 100 for this font. So that way it looks the same across all kinds of different elements, whether that's a website or a design, business card or print job. Everything is 100 tracking. And then again, additional vector assets here. We've got the different archetype, just in case for whatever reason there was a need for that. And the branding element, you see that again there, the green and blue kind of Atari bars or asset bars. So all right, so this video is kind of wrapped up. That's how you build a brand. That's the steps that I would say are the most important in that order, and why you do it that way. I have a couple of just notes, and the first note is keep your brand consistent. I see a lot of brands that are changing all the time, and what they're really doing is shooting their personality in the foot every time they do that. Don't change your logo color with every holiday. Don't do red, white, and blue logo or something. It's just not good for your brand. You want to keep that consistent so that everybody knows all the time exactly what they're looking at once they've seen it once. Use your brand guide on everything. Don't deviate from the brand guide unless you're adding on to the brand guide and then doing stuff. But keep that brand guide really simple and then just stick to it. I know the same font gets boring, and wow, that Wingdings font just looks super cool right now, but just avoid the temptation to use that. Use the stuff that's on your brand guide. Everything will look the same, but it'll look clean, it'll look professional. It'll communicate that I am this person. I am this company. This is this is what I do, and this is my personality. And then people get used to seeing that. People aren't gonna notice when you're using the same font across everything. No one's gonna pick that out, but they're gonna feel it. Now they're gonna notice once wingdings start showing up and everything is, you know, weird characters, and all of a sudden they're like, well, that's dumb, that's not part of, you know, that's not professional, that's not classy. So just avoid the temptation to change up things, stay consistent with what you're doing. Another one that I see all the time is misuse of logo. They'll give it, you know, to somebody, it'll stretch or shrink the logo. Be careful with who you give your logo to and make sure they're using it properly. Or maybe sometimes people will butt that logo right up against the edge of the paper or right on the margin, or sometimes it'll get trimmed off. Don't do that to yourself. That just looks bad and unprofessional, and we don't want ourselves to look bad. So don't cut things or trim things or squash things. It's like squashing your face. Like, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't put your face on the corner of a paper. So don't do it to your logo. That's the face of your brand. And the last one that I see all the time is obnoxious brands. Don't be an obnoxious brand. Nobody likes an obnoxious brand. Don't slap your brand on everything. There's a lot of things that your brand doesn't need to be on. If people are there and they're in your facility, you don't need your brand on everything. So avoid putting that brand everywhere, because eventually you'll just look like you're screaming at people. Don't blow it up real big. People will make their logo. I hear this all the time. Make the logo bigger. I design a flyer. Make the logo bigger. Don't make the logo bigger. The logo is there, but it's just there to subtly remind people who you are. They don't need to see the logo massive on the front of the page. It should not be the attention focus on the page or on the flyer. You want your content to be the focus, right? You want them to read what you're offering, not read the logo over and over and over again. So don't worry about the logo being the attention driver. Keep your logo small. Don't scream at people. Don't put multiple logos on the same thing. It's not necessary. Logos are meant to be subtly the face of your brand to identify you. It's your seal, it's your rubber stamp. Put it at the bottom corner, it's okay. It doesn't need to be the top, center, largest thing on a page. So don't be obnoxious and overuse your logo or your brand. Just keep it simple, keep it clean, people will appreciate it. So those are how you avoid all the bad brand use, and you want to avoid them at all costs. Thanks guys for hanging out with me. I enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I had fun putting this together. I'll be back on Chris's channel if he doesn't fire me after this video, and we'll talk about some other design stuff. But this has been How to Build a Brand. Thanks for watching.
Sweet, thanks Jacob. Now I for one had enjoyed learning more about how to build my brand when it comes to the colors and the fonts, and just there's a lot of good stuff that Jacob said in there that I am learning myself, and I'm going to take away and use it for my own personal brand. Now this is not just for people who are wanting to do photography or video or YouTube or whatever. It could be for anyone who's trying to start a business, who's trying to do what they love to do and they're passionate about. This is a very important topic. Branding is super important. Now, if you need any help with your branding, with logo design, or just consulting with someone who's knowledgeable about this, go to Jacob. He would love to be in contact with you. He would love to work with you. He would love to be able to help take your brand and your vision for your business or your brand to the next level. I'll have all his stuff linked down below, his Instagram, contact information. Get in contact with him. He would love to work with you. So I hope this was helpful. I hope the information was easy to understand. If not, go back, rewatch it. You can rewatch as many times as you want because it's YouTube. And I'm very excited to be able to bring more content to you guys, not just from me, but from others out there who are just super passionate about what they do. All right, so stick around. I'll have more content out for you guys coming up. All right, peace.